Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaeva Jivaha Sakalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksha Brahmadvitiye Shritayaha Pramanam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all existence is Brahman, time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition and realization of this truth is liberation. Brahman is one without a second, and the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof. Om peace, peace, peace. Nahi gyanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate, patsvayam yoga samsiddha kalenatmani vindate. Verily, in all the worlds, O beloved, there is no purifier like knowledge. The wise, those perfected in yoga, realize this truth in due time. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all living beings. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. So we are picking up from where we left off last time, which was in verse number 13. And let me just quickly show you that verse. And we're going to go on to verse 14 today. So due to barriers like the 9 distractions in spiritual life, often called the antaryayas or the vikshepas, doubt about my guru arose in my mind, but this was swiftly put to death when I heard of the 4 qualities of an authentic spiritual teacher. So we spent, pretty much a class and a half on those obstacles, those distractions to yoga, and how with them rising up in the mind. Remember, those are distractions of the body, and which includes the mind connected to the senses and also, one's health. It includes things like stodginess and physical laziness. It has to do with lack of constancy, all kinds, that whole list is very almost exhaustive. Anyway, but we focused on 2 in particular, having to do with doubt that arises and keeps one from being able to make a conclusion about getting on the path or staying on the path, or in the case of this particular verse, having doubts about one's teacher, even though they had been so enamored prior. So then the other one was Bhranti Darshana, and these 2 work together. That Bhranti Darshana meaning confusion of philosophy. And the gunas have a lot to do with this, but we spoke about all of that quite a bit last week. So we're going to move on now with what it was that helped the poet here get over this doubt, and that is the 4 qualities or the 4 qualifications of the teacher. Now, we actually went through this just kind of generally back in, where was that? Back in November, we talked about this. And that was when, according to the verses, he had done enough purification and had enough strong desire that finally the teacher arrived in his life, and he took refuge there, or she took refuge there. And so we had to talk about it in those terms. So here we're going to look at it in terms of how it put to rest his doubts. So the first one, and let me call up a chart here. I'm going to use the black and white so we can see the second half of the chart more easily. And I have to say that this is sort of, we won't dwell too much on this because Babaji is about to give this teaching. I've been saying this for weeks now, but he really is going to give this teaching this Sunday, he says. So, and if you were at the class last Sunday, you know that he went through the different, Shubhecha, Vicharana, Tanumanasa, Sattvapadi. He got as far as that, and the rest of the 7 levels of a knower of Brahman, we can see it all in this list, is going to happen this week. But he presented these in light of the spiritual aspirant rising up through the lower bhumikas of knowledge, the lower stages of knowledge, to the breakthrough point where it actually becomes the higher levels of knowledge. And so we learned about them in that sense. But now we're going to take a look at them in a moment after we take a look at these 4 qualities of an authentic spiritual teacher. Now, the first place that most of us ever encounter this is in the Vivekachudamani by Shankaracharya. And he says, in that scripture, a teacher is one who is deeply versed in the scriptures, who is pure, free from desire, and a perfect knower of Brahman. That one is established continually in Brahman, calm like the flame when its fuel is consumed, and an ocean of love that knows no ulterior motive, a friend to all good people who humbly entrust themselves to him. So that's a very beautiful, powerful verse that really delineates the qualities. Now, when it's funny, I was going to say, when I was growing up in Vedanta, and was at the ashram of Swami Sheshananda, I attended almost every Sunday that I was in town. And I don't know that there was ever a Sunday that he did not repeat this list of Akamahata, Shrotriya, Avrijana, and Brahmavid. And he would just give the translation just straight, devoid of selfish motives, transmits the essence of the scriptures, and leads a pure and simple life, and is a knower of Brahman. And I don't remember, it could be that I just couldn't take it in at the time, but I don't remember him going in great detail about it. So here we'll do a little bit of that. And I'm going to be drawing on this chart as it appears, the commentary that goes with this chart that is in Footfalls, which I believe is on page 88. And so these are just a few notes that Babaji gives in that book. So in a kamahata, and we see that word kama and the before it, which, kama means desire. So the teacher has no desire for him or herself. And with that goes no interest in manipulating the student for wealth, fame, praise, or power. And then going on from those notes, the teacher only wants the student to get free. So these are all hallmarks. Most of us have been with our teachers for a long time. So we've settled these things. In that verse that we're working on, it's possible that somehow at the moment of that particular verse, talking about the kind of student and the struggles that they go to, that in that verse, they're talking about somebody who hasn't really settled this for themselves. So this is one of the criteria that we can look at. And Swami Vivekananda in Bhakti Yoga spends quite a bit of time on all of these and their importance. He said there should be criteria when we set about trying to find a teacher. So a kamahata only wants the student to get free. And the work must be out of love alone. As Swami Vivekananda would say, the only medium through which spiritual force can be transmitted is love. And that, that makes us think about Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples. And I'm sure Jesus and the apostles, Buddha and the Noble Eight, etc. The bond of love that was there from the truth and the power of spirituality being transmitted, that creates a bond of love that's very, very powerful. So when we're examining a potential teacher, we would want to look at this one. Do they have a kamahata? And, I also have to say, in order to really judge that perfectly, we also have to have a desire to be free, not any other motive for spiritual life. So the next one is Shrotriya. And this is the ability to transmit the teachings and scriptures so that gradual understanding will dawn. So the essence is the main thing. Sri Ramakrishna would say, cut off the head and the tail and transmit the essence. In a somewhat different vein, but it applies here as well. You've gone to the mango grove to eat mangoes, so don't get stuck counting the trees and counting the leaves and the branches and all of that. So in other words, and this might be especially particular to Indian culture and tradition, is don't get stuck in all the grammar and the elucidations of how words are formed, how they get connected, etc. These are interesting, but the essence of what is being conveyed is the most important thing. And here, so the student will receive in this transmission that happens when the teacher has no desire and the student's only desire is to be free or to know the truth or to learn how to love God completely, then in that transmission, the student will receive this mindset of right orientation and will acquire the ability to study independently as well. But that bond of love and that bond of transmission will also create that atmosphere that, the student will want to go to the teacher and say, hey, I realize, hey, sir, I have realized these teachings. I mean, I have had these insights. Are they correct? We always want to have the teacher put the seal of approval on what we have understood. Because how we understand a thing has very much to do with to what degree those 9 obstacles are operating in us and where we are with the gunas at any given time. So this teaching transmission is only possible when the teacher has had deep study and reflection and has reached a siddhanta, like I stated in that verse, has made a sound conclusion and that is also in tune with the luminaries. So making a conclusion is really important. And that brings up for me something that Babaji has said many times, which is that, when you're trying to make a decision about something and you don't know which way to go with it, it's good to just take a stand. And then if it's the wrong one, it will show up right away. So when we don't go deep enough in the study and in our taking in and reflecting what the teacher has said to us, and we don't reach a conclusion about it, that keeps us susceptible to pramada, I think the word is, to having that doubt and to having Bhranti darshana. You know, it's reaching a conclusion that is in tune with the teacher, in tune with the luminaries, that will get us up and out of those two obstacles. So the next one is avrijana, purity. Swamiji says, in the spiritual sciences, it is impossible from first to last that there can be any spiritual light in the soul that is impure. What religion can an impure person teach? The last word of acquiring spiritual truth for oneself or imparting it to others is the purity of heart and soul. A vision of God or a glimpse of the beyond never comes until the soul is pure. And by soul here, that's a lowercase s. What he means is the mind. So also from the notes in Footfalls, Babaji cites as important things that we can note when we're looking at all of this as criteria, a moderation of all appetites in the teacher, a strong love of austerities, because this shows that the teacher has undergone the practices that he or she advises to the student. The presence of peace and its pursuit. This one I personally find very illuminating. The presence of peace and its pursuit. There's no drama here. Not only is peace a peaceful atmosphere maintained, anything that threatens it is brought under the control of peace. And so this illustrates attainment and the importance of equanimity of mind. Then, and when quiescence of mind is perceived, when the student perceives that in the teacher, because in the beginning, they may not know how to recognize that. But once the student recognizes this, the student will feel confident that the Lord is present and transmission can go forward with full trust. And then the final one is Brahmavid. So this is a teaching that shows up throughout the Sanatana Dharma. And when we look at it, we are usually looking at Lord Vashishta's rendering. So, and oftentimes when I present this teaching, it's also about trying to allay the notion that we can, that before we have ourselves achieved all of these, that we are fully qualified to be our own guru. I mean, we're getting insights about that from Shubecha on, certainly, but we still need the guru, and we never do without the guru. There's the embodied teacher who opens our eyes and our heart and our mind. There's the ultimate guru, who is the teacher of all teachers. So we never do without or leave that behind. Anyway, so the highlight of these four is right aspiration. The teacher, we should see that the teacher possesses detachment, knowledge of the scriptures and wisdom. And that they also they have engaged in proper inquiry. Let's put it kind of like that. Has obviously engaged in proper inquiry. And that means knowing the nature of the true self within, of the Atman, because such a being has gained all the virtues and knows the nature of Maya, is not, maybe walking through Maya, but is not fooled by it, and has the ability to contemplate the Atman. That's no small thing right there, to be able to contemplate the Atman. That means that one has brought the mind, speaking yogically, to a state of ekagra, one-pointedness. Tanumanasa, peaceful mind, which the display of that, the indication of that, is that the teacher is free of desire, has mastered concentration, and has actually transcended the mind. So that's also a very powerful thing. Wisdom and those kinds of essential siddhantas, conclusions, are reached by the knowledge that is beyond the mind. Then finally, sattvapati, illumined intelligence, attains renunciation, equality of vision, and non-dual truth. Elsewhere, we see the surety of non-dual truth. So, this brings us to the importance of the qualification of the student. And we're not going to approach that in terms of the four jewels and the six treasures, because that's going to come at some point in these verses. But we're going to take a look at it from another sphere. So it comes along with, in the verse that we're looking at, the verse states that having learned these four qualities of the teacher, then his doubt about the guru swiftly disappeared. And so, we can ask, well, why is that possible? Because for some people, when doubt arises, they run the other direction. What is it about this student or any student that we see, that a doubt arises, but they hang in there, they stick with it? It's because they're qualified. They're just simply struggling with the gunas, right? But they have the qualification, as Shankara puts in the Viveka Chudamani, they have the qualifications of devotion, humility, love, service, and inquiry into reality. Let me kind of show you how that shows up in the Viveka Chudamani. So we've seen this chart many times, but it's always good to look through it. We're not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to show you that, these are different qualifications that spiritual aspirant has to pass through. And then when they finally get the four treasures and the six jewels, then a teacher arises. I mean, we can look at it this way. And so here are the 5 attributes for approaching the guru: devotion, humility, love, service, and inquiry into reality. So when a student has all of these, and I would say humility and inquiry into reality in particular, catch my mind when I look at this list, then they have perseverance. They're going to stick with it, because they know that if they're on again, off again, in their feeling of inspiration and interest, the humility kicks in and says, that's you, not the situation, right? And because they have inquiry into reality, they're not settling for the things of the world. They want what is essential, not what is changing. So anyway, I just thought I would bring that one out. Let's see, there was something from Swamiji I wanted to share. In Bhakti Yoga, Swamiji says that the qualification of the tat, the student, is purity, a real thirst after knowledge and perseverance. And when he talks about purity, he's referring to thought, word, and actions. The way he puts it, in thought, speech, and act. Said these are necessary to be religious, to bring those three together, because otherwise there's disharmony in the mind to think one thing, say another, and act in a different way. There's no harmony there, no peace. And then he talks about thirsting after knowledge. He says, none of us can get anything other than what we fix our hearts upon. To pant for religion, truly, is a very difficult thing. He says, going on, listening to talks, reading religious books, these are not proof of a real want felt in the heart. There must be a continuous struggle with one's lower nature till the higher want is actually felt. That I find a very powerful statement there. There must be continuous struggle with one's lower nature, the outgoing senses, till the higher want is actually felt. So, Babaji is often telling us, that it's very important that we not only hear the truth, that we contemplate it. I know we've heard this so many times, but what this does is it puts us in the atmosphere. And when we keep our minds in the atmosphere of truth, then this is what Swamiji is talking about. This is the struggle with our lower nature, not falling back into old habits, but trying to keep the mind at a higher level for as long as we can. And so as we do that, we become acclimatized to that, and we begin to feel the higher want naturally. So, and all of this together ensures the sincerity of the student, and that the student has perseverance so that they can ride out, so we can ride out the gunas, rajas and tamas, when they arise, and rise above just mere sattva, so that we are able to contemplate subtle truth. So, because the problem, Holy Mother tells us that, that peace, we want peace first and foremost. But the first stage of that peace is just plain old sattva, plain old sattva. Those of us, anyone who doesn't have that all the time won't think that that's a minor thing. But, is it the kind of sattva that's going to fall back into rajas and tamas when challenges come? So that's why we have to get up to pure sattva. So when the student has all of this, then they're in a better position to have their doubts alleviated by just looking at those four qualifications of the student. So we're going to move forward now into the next verse. I suppose I should pause for a second and see if there's any questions or comments. Are there? Yeah, I'll just take a moment here. Then we shall move on. So the next verse, even though the doubt has been dispelled, there's a sense of shame, remorse for having having had doubt at all. So shame at my lack of faith in the Guru made me aware of the presence of the 8 fetters in human nature. So I quelled them methodically by engaging in the triple tenet of Kriya Yoga and other salient practices. So this is what we're going to take up right now. We're going to look first at the 8 fetters, and let me share that chart. Let's begin by looking at this quote at the bottom. Preoccupation with relative existence is to be transcended. When impeding factors such as the 6 transformations, the 6 passions, the 6 billows, the 8 fetters, the 3 gunas, and the pairs of opposites verily besiege mankind at every step, all of them attended by constant change and pervasive suffering, how desirable can this life be? Reminds me of the analogy of the playground of Maya, where our playmates are the 6 transformations. For those who aren't familiar with them, they're birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death. And then the 6 passions: lust, anger, greed, delusion, vanity, and jealousy. Hunger, thirst, grief, death, dotage, delusion. Those are the 6 billows. We've been hearing these, many times. The thing I want to point out about these is that they all have to do with the kleshas and the vikshepas, or those 9 distractions to yoga. We have the 5 obstacles to yoga. Those are the kleshas: ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. And we have those 9 vikshepas, or viparayas. In my studies this week in preparation, I came across a statement by a commentator on the Yoga Sutras that those 9 obstacles are both, some of them themselves are chittavrittis, vibrations of the mind, and others are the causes of vibration of the mind. Some of them are both. And where those are, there will always be this rising in the mind, this distraction of the mind. So the results of all of those are also these. So I'd like to show you something that kind of shows all of this at once. It's the dissolution of the mind in yoga. You remember this chart. This is just a portion of it. So here are those 9 impediments again: disease, complacency, doubt, negligence, samshaya. I was getting the Sanskrit mixed up. Idleness, sensuality, confusion of philosophy, inability to get to samadhi, the lower ones at least, and backsliding when one does. These are all, and then we saw these last week, when we have these impediments happening, then we also have sorrow, despair, unsteadiness of the body, uneven breathing. And we have all those other things that I was just showing you, these here. So when we're in a body, we have those 6 transformations. When we're in the body and we don't have control of the mind, we're unable to concentrate. When we don't have proper inquiry, then, we have all of this going on. And we have to be direct about it. Where there is ignorance, let's go back to this. Where there is ignorance, there is a sense of separation. There's attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. What I'm hoping to express here is how interconnected all of this is. And when we look at, reflect back on that quote we started with, that preoccupation with relative existence puts us in harm's way. And so, we have Sri Ramakrishna telling us that anyone in Maya, anyone suffering the effects of avidya, ignorance, should forthwith be like a woman with an infant in a house on fire and take the first exit. So this is our house on fire. So let's take a look at these. Okay, we're going to look now at the 8 fetters in particular. Hatred. All of these are based in the delusion spilling out of avidya. Shame. This is what what was referred to in that verse, that the person referred to had doubt, had lost faith in the teacher a little bit, and when they came back up out of rajas and tamas and its attendant vikshepas, those obstacles, then when he was back in, or she is back in sattva, then there was shame around having fallen, right? That's actually a good thing. I mean, there's another way of looking at a few of these, like shame, lineage, secrecy, that, we could take a positive track with these and say that some of these are like the mango skin, right? Sri Ramakrishna says that Maya is like the skin of a mango, and we wouldn't want to eat it. But without that skin, the mango won't ripen. So if we think back in the lower levels of, those 7 levels of lower knowledge that Babaji took us through for over the course of 3 classes, then we'll see that, beings are moving step by step up and out of, Bindu Jagrat, where, we're just an individual and very tightly caught up in that individuality. And then we see that, oh, there's a bigger world out there, and our individuality kind of expands, but it's all with desire. And then it just keeps progressing. So at some point, when more subtle information begins to make itself known in those lower levels of knowledge, there's a place where shame is important, because we have this shame of, for wrongdoing. And that's the skin of the mango right there. We need that. It keeps us on the, moving along the path. We don't want to feel that, and we don't want to do what's wrong, because we're still operating where there's good and bad, pleasure and pain, all of that, and using these as rungs of a ladder. Being proud of our spiritual lineage, if we've reached the point where we have a spiritual lineage, that can be a good thing for a while. Fear of committing wrongdoing, that can be good for a while. Yeah, so, but there comes a point where these are in the way. And Sri Ramakrishna really epitomizes what happens to a being when they are up and out of this. That's where shame is not about, wrongdoing or not. It's more about fear of what others will think, right? Things like that. Even fear of losing oneself in God, that in his case, like clothes would fall off, right? So he would go into these states where he was up and out of all of this. So anyway, but from the get-go, we need to divest ourselves of dvesha, hatred. We don't want to have this kind of pride of lineage, or, for Westerners, Varna, caste, would really be more likened to our social economic status, our race, etc. We don't want to think that we're better than others. This definitely gets in the way, because the Atman is in all things, and what's on the surface is not essential. We don't want to get hung up with grief that never passes. Secrecy, this needs to be looked at in terms of making a distinction between privacy and secrecy. Is one engaging in secrecy in order to manipulate others? Engaging in secrecy because they're ashamed of something? Privacy is more like one's personal life, one's mantra, etc. So, and then pride. Here, just DARPA in general. We don't want to have that pride in all of those things. We don't want pride in wealth, pride in intellectual attainments, pride in knowledge, etc. So Sri Ramakrishna once was talking about some pundits, I think, or one in particular who was very prideful, maybe arrogant, and he said, "Tell me, is pride ever the result of knowledge?" And that's knowledge with a capital N. So when one has true knowledge, one knows that knowledge has a source, and that source is in divine reality, or that source is in Divine Mother. So these are the 8 fetters. In that verse, we see that he became aware of all of these, and or she became aware of these 8 fetters in human nature, and saw that to one degree or another, these existed in them, and they needed to be gotten over. So transcended, dissolved, gotten rid of. I'm looking at my notes right now. So there was one other point I wanted to make, and to make that, I want to show the 24 cosmic principles, because a point that Babaji has made quite a number of times, and its significance is dawning more and more on me, and probably other students as well, is that when we do the dissolution of the mind stream, when we dissolve the tattvas into their source, then such things as the 9 obstacles and the six passions, the 8 fetters, all of those things, even the 6 transformations, right? And ultimately the 5 kleshas as well. I hope these aren't just a bunch of words to you. I hope, that you know what I'm speaking of when I talk about the 5 kleshas: ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. The 6 transformations, birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death, and all of those. But those are a function of relative existence, and they stay maintained as long as we have attachment to the body, to our senses, to the objects, so long as we are attached to pleasure and have fear of pain. When we identify ourselves with the non-self, those are in operation. But when we engage in this practice of dissolving the tattvas into their source, these naturally go away. So for those who are seeing this and haven't ever looked at these, let's just go, a few weeks ago, we talked about the 10 tenets of Samkhya. And in those 10 tenets, it's saying over in various ways that Purusha has nothing to do with Prakriti. Prakriti, well, I mean, there is an apparent union, but there's also a separation away, and that's the freedom, because Purusha and Prakriti are eternally separate. So, and everything has come out of Prakriti. It is the first cause. And so everything from the Mahat, out of which comes the intellect, out of which comes the ego, which gets further, the evolutes further come out, and we get the cognitive senses, the active senses, the subtle elements, and the so-called gross elements. In that dissolution of the mind stream, we are taking all of these back and dissolving them into the mind first, because from the mind, out of sattvic ahamkara, all of these have flowed out. Don't worry, I know this is crash course for those of you who are not familiar with it, but we will be taking this up a number of times throughout this series. But all of these, earth, air, fire, water, and ether, the subtle sense objects, the subtle elements, these all dissolve into that. All of these dissolve into the cognitive senses. They all work together, because without the senses, then we wouldn't be going out. And why would the senses go out unless there were objects, right? So these things are all interconnected, from gross into subtle, with the grossest one being the earth. So as these go into the mind, we start to see the physical body go away. We see the pranas get more subtle. We enter into the subtle body, and then finally into the causal body. All of this, when these things are all dissolved and we know ourselves completely separate, then all of those things disappear. The 8 fetters, the 5 kleshas, and their attendant vikshepas, all of those go away. So, just wanted to point that out. So the next thing that's in our teaching here, and we only have a few minutes left, so we're just going to touch base with it, is, let me read that verse again. Shame at my lack of faith in the Guru made me aware of the presence of the 8 fetters in human nature. So I quelled them methodically by engaging in the triple tenet of Kriya Yoga and other salient practices. So we're going to take up the triple tenet of Kriya Yoga. And before I forget, I just want to say that the new copy of Nectar has the entire encomium in it, in the back. So if you got your copy, you will find it there. If you didn't, you can order it. And you can also know that the PDF version will come out this summer. So the first thing that Babaji says about Kriya Yoga, okay, Kriya Yoga, this is Patanjali's Kriya Yoga, and it's made up of tapas, which is austerity, svadhyaya, which is study of scripture and recitation, memorization, and then Ishvara Pranidhana, devotion and self-surrender to God. And the first thing he says is that these three make up a healthy spiritual life. And if you think about it, those of us who've been with Babaji for many, many years, you'll realize that from the get-go, he was always leading us into, towards this, that this was our practice. He gave us, when we were initiated, we got our austerity. What was that? It was our meditation practice and what our discipline would be around that, and teachings on how to control the mind. We got our svadhyaya, we got the mantra, we got teachings on Om, and we got Ishvara Pranidhana in that initiation. We got connected at a very deep and profound level to our chosen ideal. So even in initiation, we were being given that Kriya Yoga. And then as we continued along and attended classes and learned what were the essential scriptures that we should be studying, then we started engaging in the svadhyaya of study of the scriptures. In our classes, we learned about Om and how to break it into its matras, A-U-M, and the A matra, the Shvara at the top, the unsounded portion, Turiya. We were taught what all of it meant. We were told to engage in contemplation and memorization. We were given these, 4 times 7, and there's a surprise coming at the next retreat for everyone. All these verses to memorize so that we have it in our mind. So this is the Kriya Yoga. And I also want to mention that it's the first verse of the second section of the Yoga Sutras. So the first section of the Yoga Sutras has to do with introducing us to what yoga is, which is samadhi, union with God, and all different attendant teachings that go with that. But the practice section begins in earnest not that you're not practicing in the first pada, but how do we get that? What is going to be our sure and certain method? And that shows up in the second pada, sometimes called the sadhana pada of the Yoga Sutras. And the first verse is this listing of Kriya Yoga. And so this is our practice. And by doing this again, those antarayas will disappear. We will overcome karmas and samskaras and vasanas by engaging in austerity, svadhyaya, and Ishvara Pranidhana, and so forth. So we will dive into this with more detail and depth at our next class, which for me with you will be the first class in June, because, well, I'll give you the announcements at the end. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasuma Jyotir Gamaya Mrichorma Amritam Gamaya Abhira Bhira Mayedhi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us, O Lord and Mother of the universe, from the illusion of death to realization of eternal existence. Reach us through and through with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om Tat Sat.